I got the shower as far along as I can take it right now until I finish the paneling across the ceiling and tie into this paneling, and then I can put this last piece of TNG up right up against the ceiling. So I'm going to move on and tackle one of the things that's really challenged my brain, this header for the back. It slips in right here. I made this from a template just like everything else. And I'm just going to clamp this in place. I got this thing in here. Yeah, I made that from a template too. And I laminated and glued up these two pieces to it. And now the big challenge is how to fill in this gap right in here. I've got this thing in here pretty square. I mean, it's level to the truck because the joint on the piece right here is maybe about a ½ inch above this rib. And the joint on this side is about a ½ inch above it too. So it's pretty level, or level to the truck at least, to the floor. It's parallel to the floor of the truck. So now I just have to figure out how I'm going to trim this out. Here's the challenge. I got to fill this area in right in here so I can create a solid channel. And that way, when the paneling comes up to the wall here, it can butt up against the side of this channel, terminate against it, all the way around the top of the ceiling too. So this is a really important feature here, and it's going to be a little bit tricky. If you notice, the seam of the truck is right here. So I can hold this piece of Padauk square, straight, or plumb, or whatever you want to call it, even to that seam, and then I can measure the maximum distance that it is from the van, from the back wall of the van, and that's like 3 3/8 right there. It gets narrower and narrower, but the widest point is down here is 3 3/8. So what I've done is I've ripped some Padauk that's 3 3/8 of an inch, and I ought to be able to hold this in here somehow so I can clamp it and scribe it to this shape right here. I took a piece of scrap 1x, I ripped it down to 3 3/8 of an inch, and I glued it with 2P10 just temporarily right to this piece of Padauk. And now, if I'm lucky and this works, I'm going to hold this against the truck right here and put a clamp on it. Hopefully, that'll hold it still long. Yep, it's straight. I'll try and keep my hands out of the way so you can see this. And here's the scribes holding them kind of square to the truck, you know, perpendicular to the side of the truck. And then keeping this edge right on that edge of the truck. I'll put my thumb there just to hold that point still. And then keeping the pencil lead right onto the wood. And yeah, this is kind of crude the first time when you've got your scribe spread this far apart. It's hard to get a really nice, perfectly straight, clean line, but you always kind of anticipate when you're doing something like this that you're going to have to scribe it twice. Here we go. First try. Oh, came out a lot closer than I thought it would. It's rocking just a little bit. And I anticipated that because, like I said earlier, there's a little bit of a high spot on the inside here that's like a little bit of a reverse bevel. So all I'm going to have to do to make this sit flat is just take my low-angle block plane here and take the inside edge of this off just a little bit. And the grain of the wood's kind of funny. I can feel it. It's coming up out of the piece of wood. So if I were to keep going in this direction, you can see the grain of the wood. The grain of the wood, let me get in here real close so you can see it. The grain of the wood is coming up like this out of this piece of wood. So if I'm using my block plane in this direction, I'm kind of like digging straight into the end grain. And what I want to do is I want to cut across that end grain. So I'm going to move in this direction, and I'll be able to get a nice slice right through there. I think that'll do just fine. It's got a little funny angle, but everything in here has got a funny angle. So I'll just take this piece, I'll use it as a pattern for the other side, And then I'll laminate both of these right to the back of that headboard. I had to walk around the other side so I could show you this. Here's the header at the front. This is the headliner, little shelf for storage that we're going to have. And this is another piece of Padauk. So this piece of Padauk and the piece of Padauk in the back will kind of match. And they'll kind of tie the whole van together front to back. All of these little slots in here, if you remember from previous videos, all of this is a torsion box design, so it's really strong, but there's a piece of trim that goes on here that's rabbeted, and I'm almost ready to put that in. We've run all of our wires in here. I've got all of my wires running for all of my switches. The switches will be mounted right in the ceiling of this headliner, and one of the switches will dump my gray water tank while I'm driving down the road if I want to. One of the switches will turn on the exterior light out here, and one of them will turn on the backup lights back there. I'm trying to stay out of Devin's way. Unfortunately, he's put this paper here, so I'm not going to get insulation all over me with that spray foam. I'm trying to trim out this window, and my first attempt was I just made a rectangular jam extension, or jam, that slipped right over this. And I could show you that, but I already cut it up and threw it away because I decided I really want these corners to be round. I want that jam to have radius corners. So this is going to be a little bit more complicated. I made a 1/4-inch plywood template. Yep, back to a template that fits on here just perfect. It's about 1/8 of an inch proud, so the frame I'm going to make will fit over this frame easily. So let me take you to my workbench and I'll show you what I'm up to. Here's that template I made, and you can see I've already laid it on here. I made up this frame out of 1/2-inch Baltic birch plywood, and I'm just going to use this frame as a router template actually to make the trim itself. So I'm laying the template for the window right on top of the frame. Let me get it centered back on here. So the frame overlaps the template on the window. Now I've already marked the interior radius right up against the window, and all I have left to do is mark the exterior radius, just like this. So the frame will look like a porthole. There we go. So I'll take each one of these, I'll take this whole thing apart now, and I've got it all marked. I just have it held with dominoes for a moment. So I can take all these pieces apart and I can cut them separately on a bandsaw and ease these edges on my little sander and put it back together again with glue the next time, and actually use this frame as a template to cut the blank I'm going to make out of Padauk to trim out that window. I made all the initial cuts on these corners and stuff with my jigsaw, but I'm going to make these straight cuts with the big blade on my bandsaw because it cuts so straight. I won't have to clean these up at all. So now all I'm going to do is I'm going to glue this thing back together again. And yeah, I've lost several of the domino mortises because they got cut off, but I didn't need all of them. I really only needed that one to register this thing flush. Just like that. There's a piece. With those dominoes in there, it almost doesn't matter what direction you clamp from. As long as the clamping is consistent, it draws the whole thing together. And those miters that were open a little bit when I just had it dry fit, now they closed up nice and tight. And that is the form I'll use with a pattern bit to cut the Padauk once I glue it up.